Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound Radio Show, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful, wearying, I need a better W word for that, world of mixed martial arts. I'm Robert Winfrey, I'm your host for this evening. Tonight we will be unpacking UFC 227 and going over some of the fights that have been announced. The UFC announced... God, I hate the circus. I really hate the circus, and I'll go into all of that later, but... why would they even sign Nate Diaz to another fight? Oh god, that's going to be such a headache for everyone involved. Anyway, we'll get to that. Don't want to jump too far ahead of myself here. Mostly we'll be, again, unpacking UFC 227, TJ Dillashaw cementing himself as the best bantamweight in the world right now. The scoring... controversial as it may have been, and I'll say that kindly, about Henry Cejudo defeating Demetrious Johnson, and the rest of the card basically sucking out loud. So we'll go over all of that, then we'll go over news, and then we'll be off for a week, because there's no UFC event for a few weeks, thank God. I need a break. I am burned out just from the volume. I am burned out because I thought the sport was better than this, but... what are you going to do? It is, I mean, again, if I had any sort of moral certitude or courage, I'd actually just stop doing this, but I am a coward. Anyway, here with me, now that I've deeply depressed everyone. First up, my regular partner in crime is back. Jeff Harris is here. Jeff, how you doing this evening?
Buck up, Robert Winfrey.
No.
Buck up.
I categorically
Get your
refuse.
blood up.
Nah, there's nothing
Do
with
it.
getting my blood up over this.
We know why you're really upset.
No, I'm upset because my favorite fighter lost. I'm not going to lie about it.
You know the real reason you're upset is because you called the main event wrong, and I called
didn't.
it correctly.
I predicted TJ.
Last week you didn't.
No, I said I thought TJ would win. It's literally on air. It's literally my prediction at the round table.
Yeah, he's on record. He would have preferred Cody to win, but he called the TJ win.
I called
no.
it
Like
first, though.
if I'm okay, like
But
again,
I called it first.
if I'm rooting, yeah, sure, there might be a slight root for Cody because I don't like TJ's
Why?
face. I don't like TJ Dillashaw's face, and I don't want to look at it.
Why?
I don't know.
TJ Dillashaw is a terrible person.
Does it make me a terrible person that I was rooting for Dillashaw after Cody Garbrandt insulted me on the conference call?
No, not at
No,
all.
that was funny though.
No, it's not at all. Look, who you
You know
root for?
what? Maybe I'm happy Henry Cejudo won because Demetrious Johnson trolled me. Because that was not cool.
No, come on. That was funny.
No, I'll always dislike TJ.
It was
just
kind of
because
funny, but I mean, I'm a little upset that the PR rep did when I asked where's TJ, the rep didn't speak up until 20 minutes later.
Okay, so I
Like Johnson trolled me like that. That was not cool.
Okay, so the
For
PR
starters,
team. No, the PR team's kind of left you.
Listen,
The
that
PR team
conference
hung you
call,
out to
I
dry.
could not even hear what was coming on because the feedback from my end, the feedback noise was so. I'm sorry, I got trolled. Johnson did troll me, so fool me once, shame on me. But the feedback was so horrible, I could barely hear what was coming on the other line. So
To the best of my knowledge, you're not alone in that. From what I've
conference
heard.
call quality for that, and the PR reps for not speaking up when Johnson was trolling me. Because, first of all, Johnson's like, shame on you for not paying attention. They're coming in and no. I got an email specifically from the UFC saying we're going to do all four members of the main event and co-main event in one call. We're not going to stagger them like they do sometimes. So, and then Johnson's saying, oh, they're going to do it in the next 30 minutes. No, that's not how the conference call is working today. And then for whatever reason, Cejudo was falling off. Dillashaw wasn't there. And then I've got Cody Garbrandt saying, who's ever asking these questions sucks. Well, you know what, Cody No Love? They should change your name to Cody No Chin because you ain't got one of those. You've been exposed.
No,
So,
I mean, look, who you root for is who you root for based on personal.
TJ Dillashaw just ruined this kid's career in 2 fights.
Yep, and the UFC let him do it. Oh,
But he
I'm,
can get,
I'm
you
so
know what?
annoyed
Get
at
a
that.
few more inches. Get a few more inches of your skin tattooed. I think I can see. I think I could still see parts of your torso.
I don't think he has any more inches to get tattooed at this point.
You'd have
You
to
know,
ask his wife.
I can understand getting tattoos and some tattoos, but I mean, seriously, why do you get tattoos on your neck? Like, why?
I don't know. I mean,
What does that do for you?
there's nothing but bad ink in MMA. Like, there's no good ink work anywhere. Anyway, you also heard Pat Mullen on the call here, who, due to personal disgust, time constraints, etc., is gonna have a brief rant and then is gonna have to bow out for the rest of this particular episode. So, Pat, hope you're doing all right. The floor is yours. I've got a timer here, so again, I know you can be concise with your criticism among these things. So, the floor is yours. Have at it.
I can. Firstly, I want to give credit to Demetrious Johnson for taking his screw job in stride. He exhibited an exorbitant amount of class last night when being interviewed. And because he doesn't have that lack of class to say what should be said, I'm going to take that burden upon myself. I'd like to say fuck you to the Ultimate Fighting Championship for never supporting a guy who went out there and made himself the best fighter in the world. I'd like to say fuck you for not being supportive of him, for being combative with him, for not trying to promote him. I'd like to say fuck you to the UFC for continuing to give high-profile, important fights to Sal D'Amato, who has proven to be nothing but a completely incompetent judge through the entirety of his career. Prime examples being Thiago Silva versus Matt Hamill, Ed Herman versus Trevor Smith, Ricky Fukuda versus Nick Ring, Nick Lentz versus Tyson Griffin, Dominic Cruz versus TJ Dillashaw, Brian Ebersol versus James Head, Lyoto Machida versus Phil Davis, Lyoto Machida versus Quentin Jackson, Diego Sanchez versus Martin Kampman, Alex Caceres versus Edwin Figueroa, and Court McGee versus Robert Whittaker, just to name a few fights that he completely scored incorrectly. I'd like to say fuck you to Sal D'Amato for continuing to put his lack of knowledge into play, his utter contempt for correct judging, and his utter contempt for the fighters in this sport and for fans of this sport for scoring these fights these way on a consistently terrible basis. Fuck you, Sal D'Amato. I'd like to say fuck you to Daniel Cormier because your bias for anybody who is a wrestler of any kind and your inability to check your bias at the door continues to paint a skewed picture of what is actually happening to people who don't know better and are starting to enjoy fights, and they hear somebody who they think knows what they're talking about. They can carry on that opinion, which is completely wrong as usual, because Daniel Cormier, I don't know whether he's taken too many shots to the head from John Jones, but he is incapable of telling you what's going on accurately in a fight involving a wrestler. I'd like to say fuck you to Joe Rogan for continuing to be a double standard and having no credibility, because on your Joe Rogan experience, you want to go ahead and criticize the UFC and how they do things and how you think they should be. But then when you're on their pay-per-view, on their dollar, you are consistently a paid shill yes man pushing the agenda that they want you to. So fuck you, Joe Rogan. I'd like to say fuck you to John Anik, because after working with the UFC for the amount of time you have, you still don't know anything about what's going on in front of you. And that is a disservice to anyone who has to hear your commentary. So fuck you, John Anik, and your ignorance. I'd like to say fuck you, in general, to the agenda being pushed by the UFC to try to bring down the best fighter in the sport. I'd like to say fuck you to anybody who thinks takedowns and holding is any better than consistently landing striking while standing up. I'd like to say fuck you to this non-sport because it's controlled realistically by one main sanctioning body, which is the UFC, where there are no checks and balances, where nothing that's wrong is ever corrected, and I have no faith in going forward that anything ever will be. This is the WWE trying to pretend it's real and pushing people they want to push, not pushing people they don't want to push, and controlling it while trying to tell you that it's real. This is WWE 1960. They want you to believe it's real, but it's not. Because ultimately they're going to tell you who wins and who loses. And even when the result is different, they're going to control who wins and who loses. So, I'm out. I'm probably going to only support a handful and watch a handful of fighters, one of them being Demetrious Johnson, if he gets to fight again, because the likelihood is he'll voice his displeasure with the UFC. They won't offer him a title fight in his next fight, which is absurd because that's exactly what he deserves. And they'll make him wait. They'll make him play it out, and they'll eventually either ship him off somewhere else or he'll retire because that's what they do. But if he does fight again, I'll absolutely watch and support him. And I want to thank him for being the greatest fighter in the UFC over the past decade easily, if not longer. If not, maybe ever. I'll support the few fighters who I continue to enjoy watching on a consistent basis. Your Dominic Cruzes, your Robert Whitakers, your Khabib Nurmagomedovs, although I don't think I'm going to watch Khabib's next fight. I'll continue to watch and support those guys, but the UFC as a whole can kiss my ass. They can kiss the ass of Demetrious Johnson. They somehow, despite trying to say they always put their fans first, continue to put Sal D'Amato in these spots. Go figure how that works out. And they can go to hell. And I'm done.
All right, Pat. Okay, on that note, let's go ahead and jump into the main event. TJ Dillashaw, again, defeats Cody Garbrandt, this time in the first round via relatively brutal standing TKO. Jeff, you called this one, right? You kind of had a decent enough feel for this from the... Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, hang on. Let me see if I can fix this.
Was I meant to be called back?
No, sorry, try hanging that up again.
Okay.
Apologies to everyone listening. Jeff, you there?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Minor Skype difficulties, but they are... I'll take intermittent Skype difficulties over the blog talk issues we had consistently any day of the week, so my apologies for that, guys. Anyway, Jeff, I wanted to give you first crack at Dillashaw's win over Cody Garbrandt. So, your thoughts on that fight, what you saw, what you liked, going forward, etc.?
Cody Garbrandt does not have a chin. I'm sorry, Robert, you're wrong. He's not going to be cutting up the rest of the division anymore. He's been exposed. He fights with his chin too much. And he's an emotional, angry fighter. And Dillashaw has exposed that twice. And to me, he's a cocky, arrogant brat. And he's immature. Look how he handled those offensive tweets he wrote getting exposed last week. Not that I'm going to condemn him for those tweets. Because even if he wrote those in his early 20s and not a teenager like he tried to claim. He just handled that with a lack of maturity, and I think he could have handled that a lot better when put in front of the media, and he was getting asked about those tweets. And look, maybe he's 27 years old and there are still things he needs to learn in terms of his maturity. But he didn't handle his meteoric rise very well. And I don't think TJ Dillashaw has been getting enough credit for what he's accomplished in his career. And I feel like it's been that way with you, Robert, and you, Pat, for years. For his evolution into an elite level fighter, and improving his game and getting better, I think every fight. And in terms of his career,
every other fight, certainly.
To me, he's one of the best bantamweight fighters of all time, and he deserves credit for that.
He is. He unequivocally is at this point.
Instead of just all the snarky comments about not liking his face or whatever.
I don't.
And I know, and you know what? I feel like there's an argument to be made for him in that first fight with Dominic Cruz. And I think
there is, but it's not a good one.
I think the other thing about TJ Dillashaw is when when you're fighting Dominic Cruz generally isn't coming to take your head off, He's not a knockout artist, and he never has been.
Nope.
He uses his speed, his movement, his technique to win fights, generally. And then he has his takedowns. But I feel like Cody was way too overconfident comparing Dillashaw to Cruz, because Cruz brings a whole other skill set to the table than Cruz does, and in many ways Dillashaw is a much more dangerous opponent than Cruz will ever be, because Cruz how often is Cruz really trying to finish you, Robert?
He doesn't have a lot of knockout power. I think you're right. I think there's I'd change some of the linguistics slightly. Let me put it like this. I agree with you that Dillashaw is a more dangerous fighter. I might actually argue that Cruz is harder to beat, but that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing.
Because how many people have actually beaten Cruz? Just Uriah Faber and Cody Garbrandt. And the Uriah Faber fight was ages ago, right?
Yeah.
And even the Cody Garbrandt fight, it wasn't a blowout, right?
It was a blowout. Like I've rewatched that fight, and I want to go back in time and slap myself for scoring it the way I did. That was a relatively significant blowout by Cody. That's one of my favorite performances in MMA history.
Let's say it's 4-1. Yeah, and that was a very important fight for Garbrandt. It was a very impressive, but again, I don't think Dillashaw gets enough respect. Keenan Barao is a far cry from the fighter he used to be, but when Barao was on top, was he not one of the scariest opponents we've ever seen to ever step foot into the octagon? I felt like he was.
He wasn't that scary. Don't get me wrong, he was good, but
come on.
No, come on. I can name 5 other guys.
Now we're doing revisionist history.
No. Honestly, even when Barao was at his best, and I thought he was the best bantamweight in the world, absent Cruz.
Lame.
No. You asked if he was the scariest.
He was
not the scariest.
He was scary.
No.
People were favoring him over Cruz when they were matched up.
Which was stupid.
Was it stupid?
Yes.
Why?
He's too slow, and he plants his feet. And Cruz would have danced all over him, even when he was at his best.
Eddie Wineland, Michael McDonald, and Cruz. Cruz was out of the picture.
No, again, I'm not arguing that he was at the time probably the best bantamweight in the world.
He did to Faber what Cruz never could.
Uriah's hard to stop generally. And there's a very valid argument that was a premature start.
Plus, he had strong wins over Jorgensen and Brad Pickett, and those were tough opponents. You can't tell me those weren't. Rank and file of the division, but I feel like people are downplaying what Renan Barao did when he was on top. He was an amazing champion, and he was an amazing.
He was not. No. He was not an amazing champion.
Oh, come on.
No, and that's not his fault. His reign was unfortunately perpetually undercut by whether or not Dominic Cruz was in the picture, whether or not he was the champion or interim champion.
Cruz was injured for like 3 years.
Oh yeah. No, and look, they should. And again, some of this is not Renan's fault. They should have stripped Cruz much earlier than they did. But his big wins defending the belt were, again, a win over Faber that I'm always happy to watch Faber get finished, but there's an argument that was a premature stoppage.
Oh, come on.
No, there is. There's an argument. I don't agree with it, but there is one. He beats Eddie Wineland.
There's an argument Dustin Poirier would not have beaten Eddie Alvarez if not for the referee deducting a point and warning and giving Poirier the position.
And there's an argument that Eddie gets out of that round. I still think Poirier wins.
There's an argument Brock Lesnar should have beaten Frank Mir in their first fight.
Yeah, there's also an argument his fight with Carwin should have been stopped, which I think is a valid argument.
Stupid. It's ridiculous to dwell on that.
No, but it's important to acknowledge it.
Okay.
He beats Eddie Wineland, which was a good win. Wineland was on a good run at that point.
But I mean, Dillashaw's growth is spectacular, and you can't deny that.
Oh God, if you put the same guy who got knocked out by John Dodson, and if you showed that fight and then his last fight or his last 2 fights or his last 3 fights, completely different guys. Completely different.
I mean, look, his biggest loss since the loss to Dodson was to Rafael Assunção. Rematched with Assunção after the loss to Cruz, beat Assunção. He beat Lineker, who's been dominant in 2 divisions despite the weight. Look, but Lineker's a tough customer, is he not? Yes. Maybe not elite, but he's been.
Let me put it like this: when I say I'm less enthused about his win over Lineker, it was profoundly academic.
Okay.
He's just significantly better than John Lineker. I didn't even need to see the fight to know that.
His first title defense was against Joe Soto, and maybe you don't want to, but think about that. He had to defend his title and got an opponent change on 24 hours notice.
Yep, that can be tough. That's real. I give him credit for accepting that fight. He didn't need to.
How many champions can you actually say have done that? John Jones
Very
never
few.
did that.
No, John didn't. I suppose you could argue Khabib did, sort of, but it's a rare circumstance to have come up to begin with.
Khabib was champion. Khabib was not the champion.
No, but he accepted 3 different opponents over the course of like a week.
Yeah, but he wasn't champion. He was champion going into that fight with Joe Soto and was supposed to fight Barao.
Yeah. No, I give him a ton of credit for that.
Again, the rematch. People forget UFC 173 4 years ago. That was a huge upset.
Yeah,
huge
upset. A big upset numerically.
Huge. Not one of the biggest of all time, maybe. But I think
top 15 probably pretty easily.
But Dillashaw has more than proven that he's not a one-hit wonder.
Nope.
He's not a one-hit wonder like Holly Holm, your favorite female athlete.
She is not my favorite female athlete.
And
She's not even my favorite female combat sports athlete.
He's far more consistent than Rafael dos Anjos, I would feel, at this level.
Let me think about that.
A fighter you declared was one of the greatest lightweight fighters in MMA history.
He was on his way to it before he got stupid against Eddie.
I feel like Dillashaw is a couple wins away from being the greatest bantamweight of all time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
He needs, and to me, it's not Cejudo.
No, but that's what they'll do.
It would be Marlon Moraes. It would be Marlon Moraes and Dominic Cruz.
Yeah, if he beats those 2 back to back, yeah.
But I mean, like, a hypothetical rematch with Cruz.
That's the only competitive fight. Let me be clear. I may not like TJ.
But how much does Cruz even have left in the tank?
It's a very valid question.
That's the thing. Like, how do you measure Cruz now up against the last time he faced Dillashaw or Cruz from 6 years ago, 7 years ago? You know? I mean, yeah, it's a nice name to have on your resume, but I mean, time matters, does it not? And Cruz he's getting older, and he's still injury prone. He's one of the most snake-bitten champions in the history of the sport, right?
Him and Whitaker, man.
So let's see. I mean, how is a 33, 34-year-old Cruz going to fare against TJ Dillashaw?
Depends on what
his injuries.
It depends on what. Let me say this. I wouldn't be surprised if Cruz simply replicates what he did in the first Dillashaw fight.
He could.
Because I don't know that TJ's plugged those holes.
Are you going to take that away from Dillashaw? Are people going to take that away from Dillashaw when they discuss it 10, 20 years from now?
I don't know.
But
personally, no. Look, much as, the loss to Garbrandt for Cruz was not the type of loss that should immediately cast a lingering shadow over his next fight.
But here's my thing with Dillashaw. Dillashaw has been active, and Cruz was inactive for most of his UFC career, and that's a big problem for me, Robert, because I got to be honest, I don't think he fought a lame duck Faber, because Faber was arguably still at the top of his game.
The third fight with Faber was lame duck. The second...
It was academic to me that he was going to win that fight.
I was more annoyed he didn't finish than anything, because he should have.
But Dillashaw is the guy fighting the rank and file and contenders, and Cruz was able to get away with not having to face the really tough contenders. Uriah Faber was not a tough fight. Nope. I'm sorry.
No, look, that fight shouldn't have been made. That was a cash grab on the UFC's part.
All right. He was not keen. He did not want to grant Dillashaw a rematch either. And, you guys are talking about all this disrespect to Demetrious Johnson. I feel like there's been a lot of disrespect toward TJ Dillashaw in recent years, not just on the UFC's part, but the fans as well.
There's very little from the UFC. The UFC loves TJ.
I don't know.
Have you ever heard Dana talk about TJ? Come on.
Not Dana, but I feel like, but Dillashaw is very much butted heads with the UFC.
Well, sure. Every fighter is going to butt heads with them at some point. The question is what it's over and how quickly can it be reconciled. TJ's one of their golden boys. They really like him.
I don't know. I don't know if I don't think that's so clear to me. But I feel like you should have more respect for TJ Dillashaw and what he's done.
What leads you to believe that I don't have respect for his abilities?
Because you're so negative.
I'm negative anyway. I'm a negative person. I've been that way for 20 years.
I listened to all this drama for like 20 minutes. And I feel the event last night was not a classic, but I feel like Dillashaw's performance was stunning. And I feel like there should be at least some positivity about that. As much as can be allowed.
No, but he fought a really, really good fight. He actually made an interesting adjustment to fight Cody this time. I want to yell at Cody in a second.
He broke Cody's confidence. Did you see after Dillashaw fired back when Cody was like when he was showboating and telling him to stand in the middle? And remember when he hurt Garbrandt and rocked him that first time, you could see it in his face. You could see Garbrandt thinking, "Oh crap!" Right? Did you not just see? It was like, I
don't watch fighters' faces when I cover things, but I'll take it. I have no problem believing that actually happened.
It reminded me of times when like Kobe Bryant is on the court, and it was like an NBA Finals game, and Garbrandt just shut this other team down with like a block, and it just changed the entire complexion of the whole game, and the Lakers ended up winning that game after they were down for the first stretch. And Dillashaw is just one of those, I'm not going to compare him to John Jones, but to me he's just one of those rare breeds that when it's clutch time, the dude's got ice in his veins. And to me, he didn't start out this way, Robert. So for him to get this much better, it's astounding to me, and I think he deserves credit for that. And I just want to me, it's just the major talking point out of last night's event.
It might be. Hang on. Let me be clear.
That's the best you can mutter is meh.
30 seconds into that fight, I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, sucks to your meh, Robert. Sucks to your meh.
That's fair enough. Look, I don't have a lot of enthusiasm for anything on this card.
Okay, fair enough. That's your opinion. You're
I know.
entitled.
And look, there are people out there who were really involved and really loved, the top 3 fights on this card, and you know what? God bless you. If you do, I am not trying to impose my apathy on anyone at the moment. Sometimes I'll argue for it, but at the moment, no. Look, let me be clear about this. I think TJ is going to be champion for at least another 2 years. I don't think there's anyone in that division who's even much of a challenge.
I think Marlon Bryson's a good challenge for him, honestly.
He's not. He's really
You never
not.
know. Sometimes you never know until the fight happens.
Okay, let me be clear when I say I don't think he's much of a... It's not that Marlon is completely and fundamentally incapable of winning, but Marlon is a single-stance fighter who relies on explosion over distance, who doesn't move that well, and who, when pressured...
He can take your head off with just one strike.
Sure, but you gotta connect.
He's very dynamic.
He's not dynamic in the sense that he switches well. He's more versatile than dynamic. He's either kicking or punching. He doesn't go between them very well. He's not big on long combinations. He's not very sound defensively.
But he's proven he can compete at a high level now.
Yes.
Against very good opponents.
And look, if your point is that Marlon is
and Sterling, to me, Sterling is not good with his striking, and he's not great with his transitions, but his grappling is top notch. And he knocked out Sterling in a minute.
Yeah, and then he knocked out Jimmy Rivera in less than 2.
And what? That was Rivera's first
loss in 20 fights.
Right. So I think it's a good match. To me, that's the matchup.
It is the matchup that should be made.
Here's why I'm angry. I'm angry because none of the media were talking about Marlon Moraes last night. They kept asking. They kept asking about Cejudo and Dominic Cruz, and to me, that's disrespectful. I get, that.
What do you expect?
I get that the rivalry with Cruz could be sexy because of the first fight and what happened there. And that Dillashaw felt he was denied that rematch. But, I mean, come on. Marlon Moraes beat a guy who we thought who was next in line for the belt.
Next in line to fight for it. Look, if the argument is that Marlon Moraes is the meritorious number 1 contender, that is correct.
No, to me, he's more... How is Austin Sao even number 3 right now? All right, he does have that win over Moraes.
Because Austin Sao's only loss at bantamweight is to TJ? Look,
Austin Sao is not very good, though.
He is. He's just... You don't think he is. It's the style He beat
Rob Font. He beat Rob Font. Whoop-de-doo.
I mean, look, here's the thing with Austin Sao. He doesn't fight in a way that makes you realize how good he is. Which is fine if that's what you want to do.
He's a gatekeeper. He's a gatekeeper.
I mean, if he wins 2 more fights, you have to put...
and he's been a gatekeeper. He's been a gatekeeper since the WEC.
Look, Austin Sao is basically the John Fitch of bantamweight. And the problem, and I mean that not necessarily as some huge pejorative, but eventually you do have to acknowledge that wins matter. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
Do you rematch? Do you want to rematch Austin Sao and Moraes?
No. I would rather Moraes fights for the belt, Austin Sao fights Garbrandt.
All right, so that's a good fight. I mean, to me, you could even. How do you? I would put that fight on a Fox. Are they done with the Fox cards now?
There's one more towards the end of the year.
I don't know if you could squeeze. Maybe. All right. Well, if Dillashaw is up for it, maybe you could squeeze this on as a Fox main event. I would like this to headline a Fox card.
Yeah, but again, they're going to go with Cejudo.
Whatever. I'd be fine with that. That's the fight I want to see, though. Just because...
Look, I agree with you.
If Cruz starts training camp, who knows if Cruz can even make it through training camp right now? You know?
Look, there's people who have done polls about this in the wake of the Dillashaw, in the wake of this event.
Because of USADA and just the way fighters train now, so much of getting a title shot is now based on just timing and convenience, and who's not hurt, and who's not who's not suspended.
Who is the champion willing to fight? Who makes the most sense financially for all parties concerned? There's a lot that goes into that, and the two people that everyone that the common fan, the casual fan would be interested in seeing is either going to be Cejudo or Cruz.
But the reason the reason I could measure Dillashaw though is because Dillashaw is the guy who's was active in beating the competition while Cruz was sitting on the sidelines for most of his UFC career. And I like Cruz a lot, and I think, that style he adapted to MMA is pretty impressive and what he was able to do with it.
He's
honest,
fundamentally responsible for pushing the evolution of the sport forward over the last 5 years.
I mean, I was not crazy about him getting that second win over Benavidez, to be honest with you. And you talk about overscoring takedowns. I feel judges would overscore the takedowns of Dominic Cruz in some of the fights he won.
A few of them, maybe. I think the
WEC title fight with Benavidez.
It's been so long since I watched that fight.
Revisit that. I would like you to revisit, or Jack Slack or someone to revisit that fight and tell me what you think. Because if you want, how big of a, when we talk about this scoring system, how big of a factor is damage to you? It's significant, right?
Damage is not a scoring criteria.
Or you don't. So you don't think about damage.
Damage is not a scoring criteria.
All right. Well, I feel like if it's about all right. So the argument you put on Facebook was that takedowns don't matter in terms of giving you a top position, right?
The wording of the scoring criteria, which is profoundly stupid wording,
okay,
is that takedowns should only be scored as part of, because it's part of a subset. Because, again, you have the criteria, right? They go over this at the top of every card. You have effective striking, effective grappling, effective aggression, and effective octagon control. And within each of those, it's effective striking offense and then effective striking defense. So, again, you have offense and defense within each category. Scoring takedowns as effective offense... I believe this counts for both striking and grappling based on where it was located within the substructure. Takedowns are only to be considered not simply as a positional thing, but if you're able to mount an attack from them. Now, hang on, because this is where it gets weird.
Okay.
Pure positional changes are weighted further down the criteria. I want to say under control, that's weighted. Now, the issue there just being that control itself is the last thing that should be considered, and should only be considered assuming all other points are equal.
I honestly feel, based on my memory of this fight, which, granted, was almost 8 years ago, at WEC 50, this was a split decision he had with Benavidez. I kind of feel like Cruz only won that fight because of the takedowns. I'm not really crazy about that. I felt like Benavidez, he would trap Cruz in the pocket and he would hit him. And he busted Cruz's face. Now people even told me, people who were scoring it for Johnson last night were like, Johnson looked fresh. Like he just had a shower and had no damage, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because people are...
Now, first of all...
Damage isn't a scoring criteria, and
it's not
quite frankly, it shouldn't be.
Well, for one, damage, it's not just about cuts on your face, Okay? You can't judge solely by how cut up a guy is in his face. All right? You just can't. But if we're talking about effective striking, I thought Benavidez did some very effective things in that fight by getting Cruz in the pocket and wailing on him there. And I felt Cruz was only edging it out with some takedowns that I feel he would get a takedown, but he wasn't really doing much. He was just getting all right, he got the takedowns, but he wasn't really doing much with those takedowns either. He was a longer, taller guy who got those takedowns. Revisit that fight sometime. Now, maybe you still have it for Cruz, but I feel like I don't know. I feel to me that fight was closer than a lot of people were willing to give it credit for. And just like I feel BJ Penn beat Frankie Edgar in their first fight, I feel very strongly about that. But everyone, like, people get angry about certain fights and then they don't, which I'm genuinely confuses me. Maybe
my only issue with the Edgar Penn fight was the guy who gave Edgar all 5 rounds. That's just
and that guy was incompetent. Like,
probably Sal.
No, that was Doug Crosby.
Gave all 5 to Frankie?
Yeah. God,
that's so bad.
And Doug Crosby is, I think, one of the worst judges in the business. I think he's worse. To me, he's up there with Cecil Peoples. All right.
I think the issue with Crosby is that he's so infrequently wrong that when he's wrong, it's really obvious.
He also like trolls fans on the underground, which is like, to me, when you're in that position, you shouldn't antagonize fans. You just shouldn't. It's like kind of like Ryan Johnson on Twitter, like, you know what I'm talking about? Like, I'm not saying Chris Nolan is the best director in history, but Robert, do you ever see Chris Nolan antagonizing people on social media?
I don't know. I don't follow him. Frankly don't
well,
care.
all right. My point is he doesn't. He doesn't do that kind. Like, just to me, when you're in that position, you just have to ignore it, and you have to just, because when you get into it with the fans and you antagonize them, it's like it's like you're feeding the trolls, and you're kind of validating them. You just shouldn't do that. And I'm not saying Johnson is like didn't make any mistakes with Last Jedi or whatever, but for Doug Crosby, when people are asking like, why did you score this fight 50-45 for Edgar, and then he's going on to the underground and taunting fans, like how is he not stripped of his position right after that? I don't get it. It's to me that's a huge dereliction.
Same way Adelaide Byrd can score Triple G and Canelo for Canelo. Like,
now I understand.
There's no accountability for judges.
I understand Pat's emotion, but like, isn't a big part of the judging and the judge selection, isn't that on the athletic commissions when they regulate the fights? I know there is some. I know there is some difference when the UFC is their own regulator and they.
Oh, even when they go to different states, they can specifically request that certain judges not be.
Can they?
Yes. The athletic commission doesn't have to agree to it.
I've never heard of this.
Oh, sure. If they go to come on, they made a big stink about.
I would need to see some proof to
Didn't they make a big stink about not wanting to use Adelaide Byrd, and then for a couple of events didn't?
Where is that? All right, where can I find that?
I remember Dana mentioning it. Which may not be the best source for this, and then she did wind up judging a few of their events later. But
well, look, I mean, Dana White made a big stink about Steve Mazzagatti a lot, and we would keep seeing Steve Mazzagatti a lot at MMA events. So you say, I mean, to me, it almost seems like the commissions are just kind of like, and do what they want anyway.
Oh, of course they do. There's no accountability to the commissions. Commissions.
All right, exactly.
Commissions are a bureaucracy, and
exactly.
Bear in mind, for those of you unaware,
I feel like you can blame the UFC for some things, but I kind of feel like you can't blame them for this completely. At least completely.
It depends on how much conspiracy you're willing and how much you believe the UFC can influence who gets assigned to their events.
I mean, if you're to believe Pat, you had Vince McMahon in Sal D'Amato's ear telling him to give that round to Henry Cejudo. When I went back and I looked at your report, Robert, and you said on round 2 that Cejudo might have stolen that.
Yeah.
So,
to be fair, that doesn't mean I think he won it. That means I think he might have stolen
it. All right. Well, those are your words.
Yeah, so, I said he might have stolen it. I also said the last thing I said on the scorecard was Johnson wins 4-1, but watch Henry take it based on pointless takedowns,
All right.
which is exactly what happened.
I mean, to me, that just kind of... So you're saying he might have won at least 2. So, to me, I feel like this is not like a Penn Edgar situation. It's just not.
Yeah, even Penn Edgar at least had the correct outcome.
Now, maybe there's an argument to be made here that D'Amato should not be allowed to judge fights.
Oh, there is that argument, and
All right.
should be made, and it should be adhered to, but...
does Adelaide Byrd still judge MMA?
Probably.
When's the last, do we know the last time she was at a UFC card?
That's easy to find out. Those are all on record. And,
Okay.
I mean, of course she's still being used, because despite being incompetent and, I would argue, corrupt, there's zero accountability. Do you know how to get someone out of the athletic commissions?
All right, here's Adelaide Byrd.
I mean this in all seriousness. I looked this up as it pertains to Nevada, and this probably applies to all of them. Do you have any idea how to get someone off of an athletic commission in the state of Nevada?
Well, she is still judging UFC. Damn.
Yeah, she is. You
man.
You need a specific order from the governor to get someone out of an athletic commission.
All right, so to me the problem here is government bureaucracies.
Oh yeah, and the fact that the UFC.
But the problem is, if UFC was doing it themselves, is that better?
No, it's a different. I don't think it's. Hang on, I don't think it's worse.
I don't think that would assuage Pat's complaints. You know,
it's just a different kind of bad. There is no good in this situation.
I mean, to me, I feel like, all right, I understand Pat's passion and I respect Pat's knowledge, but I feel like when you go on rants like that, it's like, whatever. It's like, it's a little. What's the word? It's too much for me. I'm sorry.
That's fair. Again, that's fair. So anyway, moving on from the main. To close out the main event discussion. Again, TJ's going to be champ for a while, barring injury or drug test issues.
We'll see.
I don't think there's anyone who can beat him outside of maybe Cruz. I don't think Moraes has much of a chance. I don't think Austin Sao has a chance.
I would still like to see Cruz fight Jimmy Rivera, honestly, and see what happens there. I think Rivera is still due a big fight because he went through a lot in the last year to get another fight, and opponents changing. I would try to reset that fight with Cruz.
Ideally, but we don't live in an ideal world or even a world that makes sense.
I respect Cruz a lot, but I mean, I'm not talking about giving him a warm-up fight, but I mean, he gets hurt so much.
Let's see if he can get through camp. Let me just say this. I would love, just for the hilarity, Cruz to come off of another 2-year injury layoff, coming off of a loss, have him beat Dillashaw again, just for the hilarity of it. Just because that is a hilarious circumstance. But again, that's not what's going to happen. I mean, I don't think there's too much.
I don't think that. To me, that's not as hilarious because I mean, Cruz is a champion.
Hilarious.
Cruz is a champion. He never truly lost the belt. If anything, it's sort of. It's like fate. It's almost serendipitous to me.
Now, again, I just find that whole circumstance hilarious. And again, that's not what's going to happen.
But if Dillashaw, let's say, what if, but let's just hypothetically say Dillashaw beats Cruz, beats Marlon Moraes. Are you willing to acknowledge him as being an amazing champion? Finally. Yeah. Okay.
Look, he's the best bantamweight in the world right now. Best active bantamweight.
Right now.
Yeah. I don't... look, I just said I think he's going to be champion for at least 2 years.
All right. Well, the fight I want is... Let it be on record, I want Dillashaw versus Moraes. That's the fight I want.
Which is absolutely not going to happen.
Be quiet. Don't crush my dreams.
That's what I'm here for. Look, honestly, I want that fight too. It's the most meritorious, and that's what I like. I like watching the people who have earned it fight in those kind of situations. I think Marlon's earned it. That said, nobody cares about Marlon Moraes. That's just the reality. He's coming off of 2 impressive, violent finishes that nobody saw.
I mean, maybe he's not a draw yet, but I feel like people were high on him after those wins.
Not even in the bubble, in like the hardcore bubble, yes. But I mean, Marlon's last fight was the main event of a terrible FS1 card that nobody saw.
Yeah.
That's simply the reality we find ourselves in.
That's what I say, Matt, too.
Again, I wish I could just mad it, but that is the reality we find ourselves in.
Okay.
I want to see Garbrandt and Austin Sao for a very particular reason.
That's a good matchup for both those guys.
Yeah, there's a very particular reason I want to see that fight. You mentioned that Cody had been exposed, and I don't necessarily agree with that yet.
Okay.
Because I recall having
arguably that's a safe fight for him, I think.
Well, let me explain why. I had roughly that same thought about Jose Aldo after the Max Holloway fights. And it turns out that what Max Holloway was able to do is not necessarily replicable by other people. It's really a lot of Max Holloway's genius and how he fights Jose Aldo no one else can do what he does against Jose Aldo. Now, it's entirely possible that Cody's chin has been cracked and he's going to wind up being one of the bigger one-hit wonders who has like one sublime performance and then flames out and go down as one of the biggest wastes of talent in the history of the sport. But I need to see someone besides TJ Dillashaw do that. Because TJ's ability to move in at an appropriate angle, to set that angle, to then move when you adjust to it, to find the way he wants to attack, is essentially unmatched. There's nobody who does it like he does. He also brings accurate, powerful striking at distance and in the pocket. And he is able to deal with the wrestling if things happen to go that way, both offensively and defensively. And I don't know that just anyone else can replicate what TJ did. And to me, that's a big question. I mean,
what about Marlon Moraes?
Marlon and Cody?
Yeah.
Marlon's too pocket happy. Marlon's not an angular fighter. He's a mobile fighter.
Dillashaw, like, he said he noticed that when something about when Garbrandt like throws a right, like he leaves his left open or something.
Yeah, his hand position.
Like he found it. Yeah, you think Marlon Moraes couldn't figure that out?
I don't know that Marlon could capitalize on it. It's not an issue of seeing it; it's an issue of being able to execute.
I feel like he could. Especially if Garbrandt is that chinny when he takes a shot.
Yeah, again, if his chin has been cracked,
he was in survive. To me, when he went into survival mode, he did not look good.
No, and again, like
he was on the back foot, man. He wanted out. He wanted out of there.
If Cody's chin has been cracked, then yes, Marlon. Marlon certainly is not without means of winning, but.
And Dillashaw's done that. He's done that to some people. Barao was never the same after that head kick.
No, and again, you bring up Marlon and Cody, which is an interesting fight in some respects, but I think Marlon throws something at distance that doesn't quite land. He gets in close and then gets countered and probably hurt pretty badly.
I got to be honest with you. I like that matchup, Robert. So let it be noted, I like both. I like that matchup, and I like my Moraes Dillashaw idea. Dana White, don't listen to these reporters talking about Cruz and Cejudo. Do the right thing.
It's not
Give
just reporters.
Moraes his title. Get everyone. Give
Yes,
Moraes.
ignore the fan base. Let's ignore everyone who pays.
Why are you being nasty?
Yes, look,
The
man.
fans want Moraes to get his title shot.
No, they don't.
This fan does.
Okay, that's fair.
My opinion
And again,
counts
so
for-
do I, but I imagine that the average UFC fan doesn't even know who Marlon Moraes is.
How do you know that? Have you done the metrics?
Have you?
I mean, have you done more than I have?
I've seen every poll that the UFC and other big reporters have put up about who do people want Dillashaw to fight next.
Okay.
It's a runaway for Cruz. Cejudo's in second. Moraes and
Like
Austin
who-
Sao
like-
tie at around 5%.
Like a USA Today poll.
Yeah, or the Twitter polls like the UFC does.
I mean, to me, I don't trust Twitter anyway.
I mean,
'Cause you
again,
got
there's only so much.
You got Russian bots on. You got Russian bots on there.
Yeah, the Russian bots trying to keep down Marlon Moraes.
Exactly.
I mean, look, I like Marlon. I was high on Marlon outside the UFC. I like him inside the UFC. I'm on record. I thought he beat Austin Sao. I thought he got robbed in that fight. I do want him to get that shot. I think he deserves it. I also know that deserving has nothing to do with how the UFC operates.
Let's change. I want to change that. We should change it instead of being like whiny and pissy about it on podcasts.
And I want the sun to rise in the west instead of the east.
I am advocating change. Hoping change for the UFC.
And I want the sun to rise in the west instead of the east.
Well, you know, what I'm wishing for can actually happen.
If you say so.
So, with that, with that attitude, that's
my attitude is utterly
self-defeatist attitude, self-fulfilling prophecy.
My attitude is utterly immaterial to the reality of the situation. There is not a damn person on this planet who's in a decision-making capability regarding this circumstance who is swayed one iota by my enthusiasm or lack thereof.
With that attitude, of course.
My attitude is not... It has nothing to do with it. I could be as animated as I want, and it matters just as much as me being as pessimistic as I want.
In your opinion.
No.
Yes.
That's just the reality of the circumstance we find ourselves in at the moment.
In your opinion.
No, this is measurable.
In your opinion.
No, empirical. This is utterly... There is empirical data regarding this.
In your opinion.
No, empirical data is beyond opinion.
Okay. If you say so.
I've seen the numbers. Like I can legitimately point to what goes up and what goes down relative to a show-by-show basis as it pertains to this. And it has nothing. And my enthusiasm doesn't actually track. It's all. It has infinitely more.
I would like to see a UFC where we can see merit-based title shots.
I would love that too. I would genuinely love that. They'd probably go out of business in 6 months, but I'd love it.
Well, I mean, there's so.
Yeah, 6 months is a glib assessment, but
I feel like if you promoted these guys better, it wouldn't be as much. That wouldn't be an issue.
It would be less of an issue. But yeah, I mean, there's certain issues that are always going to arise as pertains to this, and that's fine. That's been the balancing act every combat sport has done since the beginning of time.
I think we can move on from that now.
Anyway, again, Dillashaw.
I have nothing else to say regarding the co-main event. If you do, go right ahead.
I'll be brief about this. Again, Henry Cejudo defeats Demetrious Johnson via split decision. 248-47 for Cejudo, 148-47 for Johnson. Officially, I scored this fight 4-1 for Mighty Mouse. 3-2 for Mighty Mouse is probably more defensible than my score. The only thing I want to say about this is I had really and profoundly hoped that MMA scoring had evolved beyond a point where lay and pray was a legitimate tactic. Sadly, I was mistaken. This is what I get for getting my hopes up. Excuse me.
It hasn't, though.
I know.
I don't think we've seen an evolution in scoring at all, so I don't know why you would...
Yeah, again, when I say evolution, that's not in the actual criteria, that's not in the actual language. It's more that, in theory, judges are getting better. We see less of this. We see more people rewarded for actual efficacy rather than, boy, I'm on top, and it doesn't matter that I got outstruck by a non-trivial margin over 3.5 minutes. If I
Would having 5 judges help?
No.
What about live scoring?
No.
What's wrong with live scoring, though?
Nothing. You asked if it would help, not if I have some fundamental objection to it.
Should we have live scoring? I think we should.
We should try it. I mean, this is what kills me about this more than anything. We know judging sucks, right? Like, there's no argument about this. I mean, one of Dana White's catchphrases is "don't leave it in the hands of the judges," which is this moronic tacit admission of incompetence and a fundamentally important, integral aspect of the sport. Right? Am I off there?
I mean... To me, it's not solely on the judges, though, Robert.
Again, I want to address. I'll address the system in a minute.
It's still a combat sport at the end of the day, and I feel like I know Demetrious Johnson is one of your favorite fighters. I just feel like there was more he could have done in that fight.
Again, I'm trying to separate this from the actual action because
to me, to me, the object of a fight, you still have to push the fight forward and engage, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like
you have to beat your opponent.
All right. To me, it wasn't. To me, even on Demetrious Johnson on his part, I don't feel like he beat it. It didn't feel that way to me.
No, it was a significantly more competitive fight than their first outing. It was a...
Right. Well, I mean, the first outing, he knocked him out in the first round.
It was And,
I mean...
Again, I don't want to... So, there's a reason I want to separate these, because I don't want to...
I feel like Anderson Silva should have had dramatic point losses for that fiasco against Damian Maia.
No.
For some of those shenanigans.
I mean, it was stupid, but nothing he did violated the rules, necessarily.
According to the rules, yes, he did. Yes.
Which one?
I looked up the rules when that fight happened. There was a rule he broke, a specific rule. And now you may not like it, but there is a rule about engaging the fight and pushing the fight forward in the unified rules.
Oh, you mean timidity?
Timidity, right?
I don't think Anderson broke that rule in that fight.
He broke the timidity rule.
I don't.
He did.
It's so weird, but I don't think he did in that fight. I think he just...
I believe he did.
I mean, there's actually a rule you're not allowed to talk to your opponent, too.
And he was talking.
I mean, I'm just pointing this out. Apparently there's a rule about talking to your opponent when you're in the cage with them that everyone violates.
Okay. Well, that could be to me, some of that's enforcement, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, everyone knows. To be fair,
everyone knows they don't always enforce warnings or fouls.
Everyone knows it's a stupid rule that you can't talk to your opponent. So no one, but because you can't actually change the rules.
Okay.
Thank you, enormous glacial government bureaucracy.
Now look, like the fight with Eddie Alvarez, to talk about rules. Now maybe 12 to 6 elbows. Now maybe those should be allowed.
They should. They're no more dangerous than any other elbow strike.
Especially if they're not to the head like that one. But that was not the only foul by Alvarez in that fight.
No, I had no issue with what Goddard did in that situation. None at all.
I mean, certainly you should not be allowed to claw the ear and grab the cage.
You should,
which he did,
and he did. Yeah. Again, I have no issue with what Goddard did there. But back to your point about scoring, I don't think any of that would help. But we literally have no way of knowing because for some reason we can't experiment with this. I would love to see what live scoring does. I would genuinely love to see what happens to fights when fighters know what the score is. I know there's a few kickboxing organizations that have open scoring like that. I would love to see.
We know the corners lie to their fighters about this,
which I have no problem with. Like you tell your fighter whatever you need to tell them. Sometimes that's just blatant falsehoods. That doesn't bother me at all. Some fighters respond better to the truth of a situation and to reality. Some respond better to fantasy. Whatever gets them in the best position to fight optimally is what your corner should do. And if that means you lie through your teeth, you lie through your teeth. But again, I mean, would 5 judges help? I don't think so, but why not try it? And sadly, we won't, because, again, the only way to change this is to change the rule set by which things operate, and we can't even agree.
You say they won't, but I mean, they did eventually apply cage side monitors, right? They have those.
Some places.
So, all right.
We can't even get a majority of commissions to agree on changing the definition of a downed fighter.
Okay. Well, I mean, once again, to me, the obvious solution here is to have we need one collective set of rules that every commission endorses and accepts. That's what needs to happen.
That'd be nice.
And to me, the problem here is that no one's proposing that.
It's been proposed, but it keeps dying.
Has it?
It's attached to the Ali Act. Actually, requires a
federal
MMA, sanctioning
body. But for MMA.
Well, they're constantly trying to get the Ali Act applied to MMA.
I mean, to me, there's got to be an easier way to do this than try to apply than have that scoring rule tied to the Ali Act for MMA.
There's really not, unless you want to.
You say there's not, but like the UFC brought in year-round mandatory drug testing
because they were utterly detached from government bureaucracy.
All right,
they are not when it comes to this.
How is USADA not government bureaucracy, Robert?
They're an independent organization. They're not state sanctioned.
That's totally a bureaucracy.
It's a bureaucracy, but it's not a government bureaucracy. USADA is not, contrary to what the name will tell you, is not actually run by the United States government.
It's the National Anti-Doping Organization for the United States.
Yes. That operates as a subset of the World Anti-Doping Agency, if memory serves. All right. Which is not associated...
It was founded by the United States Olympic Committee, right?
Yeah.
That counts for something.
Which is also, again, not actually part of the government in the traditional sense of the word.
It's not officially part of the government, but I feel like to me there's a quicker and faster solution here than the defeatist attitude, okay?
Okay.
I just think that's possible.
What is it?
I feel like we just need a body, like a collective body of the commissioners or the commit that will say, okay, let's meet once or twice a year, and we will ratify a complete and total rule set for all of MMA.
That theoretically exists, to the extent that it can, given how certain states work.
There
is a meeting of the Association of Boxing Commissions, which the athletic commissions that oversee MMA are part of. That's where the new rule set came from, was their meeting a couple of years ago.
Okay, but we can't. But then they should make a rule.
It was voted on 40, not 40.
You can't have your own rules. You can't have. You all have to have the same rules. It was
approved 48-0 by the vote of the representatives at that meeting. New Jersey didn't want it.
There has to be a whole rule set, an all-encompassing, non-mandatory,
Can I simplify this for you and tell you what you're actually asking for here?
What?
You want a singular federal sanctioning body rather than individual state sanctioning bodies. That is the...
No, it could be a network. It could be a network.
That's what we have, and it doesn't work.
I don't feel like we have that, because...
We do, it just doesn't work. Again, this happens. They have that meeting. Again,
are we talking about the ABC? Is that what we're talking about here?
I believe that's what they fall under.
What do we call this organization?
No, again, I believe it's the Association of Boxing Commissions, so I believe it would be the ABC that
all right, so then we need the ABC to say enough of this individual rule sets per state. Every state will have the same set of rules. That's simple. We can't let them keep playing around and say, this state has this rule set, this state for the same sport, for the same promotion. That should not be allowed, because it's hurting competition, right?
And again, I'm saying that the only way to functionally achieve this, because these state commissions are ensconced within the state government, is to have a superseding organization that would have to be at the federal level in this instance. You're advocating for the creation of a federal athletic commission to oversee MMA.
It might have to be international.
Well, sure, but most international places, because the countries are so much smaller, tend to be easier to deal with, and most will actually get in line of their own volition. I mean, I think every place overseas they go.
I feel like this is more doable than you're willing to give credit for.
It's theoretically possible, but at that point,
I think what's missing is the will to actually change, is the will and determination to actually change this. I feel like that's what's missing.
Well, sure. Why would the UFC want to change it? It's still working for them. They're still making money.
Right.
And again, you now need at that point you need a federal bureaucracy to supersede the state bureaucracy, which means you need legislation passed at the federal level in order to accomplish this, which means you have lobbyists from everyone under the sun fighting this way and that way. You have different states that don't want, necessarily want it.
Look, if MMA can be done in New York, I don't see why
this is... No. This is so much worse than that.
You say it's worse, but look how long that took. It took way longer than it should have.
New York also...
It took almost 20 years, Robert.
You're also dealing with a smaller bureaucracy in New York than you are in dealing with the federal government.
Right.
This bill might never ever get out of committee when it comes to how it would have to go through both the House and the Senate in order to get passed.
Well, let's sing a Just a Bill song and make it happen. Let's put this bill on Capitol Hill.
Again, I believe it's been tried.
Just a bill.
But
not enough. Keep trying.
It's
process of elimination.
And again, that's the reality of the circumstance.
Don't let your dreams be dreams. Make your dreams a reality.
You got any more motivational cat poster sayings you want to throw at me before we move on to Renato Moicano?
Hang in there.
All right. Last thing about the flyweight title fight. Again, I disagree with the scoring. I disagree with the decision. Oh, the funniest damn thing about this fight was their interview with Demetrious Johnson afterwards, where he just politely explained that Henry Cejudo did nothing. without trashing the guy. It's like the most amazing confluence of just politeness and... Oh, God. It was just... I forget what the other word is. It was just great for him to just say, no, Henry did a good job taking me down. He just held me there when he took me down, but, he's a great wrestler, and he's got good top pressure. And then, I knew on the feet, I knew he was, going to have fast hands and heavy hands in combination, and he had that, but he didn't hit me. All of which is true. It was great. It was profoundly great. We do not, quite frankly, deserve Demetrious Johnson. As for what's next for both guys, Henry doesn't want to be at flyweight. The first thing he did was say, I want to move up and fight for the bantamweight title. And here's why I think that's what's going to happen. There are only 2 options for him at flyweight, if we go by rankings. One is a rematch with Demetrious, which is what should happen in theory, considering Demetrious' profound reign and the fact that he's already beaten Henry once. And that this was, even if you scored this for Cejudo, and I'm not going to yell at anybody over that, even if you did, it's at best a controversial, marginal decision. So again, objectively it should be Demetrious in an immediate rematch. This is one of the few times it's actually justified, but the UFC doesn't want Demetrious as champion, which I believe has been gone over. And I don't think there's a whole lot of controversy about that point. So they're going to look for other options before going to that.
Can you prove that?
Come on. You really think the UFC wants DJ to get the belt back that quickly? DJ, and I love him as a fighter, is a box office.
Well, I mean, you're saying TJ's their golden boy. They wouldn't even give TJ an immediate rematch when I felt it was more warranted.
No, and let me put it this way: if that same Cruz Dillashaw circumstance were happening now under that management, he would.
I don't know about that.
I'm relatively
Cruz wanted the Faber fight.
Faber wanted that fight. The UFC wanted the money that would come from that fight because TJ hadn't established himself as a draw at that point. It was a confluence of events. I mean, and these are the
TJ arguably still isn't a draw now, but
well, we'll know more going forward.
Apparently, last night's card did a good crowd and a good gate, though, so we'll see.
That should surprise no one, but I'm much more interested in the pay-per-view numbers than I am the fact that they were able to sell out their return trip to that venue for the first time in 3 years. In Los Angeles with the backing and ownership of a talent agency centered there. I mean, it must suck to be Anthony Kiedis and be like, for all those years, be the only celebrity this UFC could show in the crowd. And now, finally, they actually have legitimate celebrities to show.
They've had big celebrities there in the past. What era are you
We define big differently.
What, The Rock? George Clooney? When
was George there?
Would
that be the Rousey fight?
He's been there. He's done UFC events before. It's been going on longer than you think.
I mean, again, it's not that it's never been a thing, but it's...
Oh, I specifically remember, I think Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore were there at Shogun versus Machida in LA.
I also imagine they were comped.
So?
I mean, let me put it like this. At least someone like Chris Pratt or Charlize Theron I know is a fan of the sport.
Mandy Moore.
Is not a star.
At one point she was.
No. Anyway, so back to my actual point. So there's that. The number 2 contender right now is Sergio Pettis, who Henry Cejudo thoroughly beat to earn his second shot at Demetrious. And then number 3 is Joseph Benavidez, who just got beat by Pettis. So unless the UFC wants to stand on their meritorious shield, and they don't, for this instance, there's not a contender that is really going to draw a lot of interest. So Henry moving up is okay. I don't agree, but I believe that's the logic.
What about Formiga?
Could
he get a shot?
No.
Why not? Did he lose recently?
No, but his last fight was a while ago, and while he did get a finish, it was... He's been struggling to break through. I don't think he has a win over a legitimate, like,
Let
top
me see.
guy.
Ben Wynn was a good win last February. There you go.
Okay, that's his best, and Wynn's been a bit iffy. He needs another
I'd be
win.
fine. That's not the worst fight you could make, honestly.
No, but he also needs at least one more big win before
Maybe.
that's a realistic consideration.
I'd be fine with the Benavidez fight, honestly.
The guy who just got beat by Sergio Pettis. Literally just happened.
Pettis lost to Cejudo recently,
Yes.
right?
Cejudo beat Pettis to earn that shot at DJ. Pettis then beat Benavidez when Benavidez came back off of that layoff.
Have like a mini round robin right there.
I mean, look, this is what I imagine happens. Cejudo moves up to fight TJ. He loses badly, but that's
I
immaterial.
really hope that doesn't happen. Really hope that doesn't. Don't say it. Please don't.
I
By
don't want
saying
it.
it, you're going to make it happen, Robert.
No,
that's
believe
the
me, if I had the power to speak things into existence, the world would be a much worse place, first of all.
problem.
But, again, I just think that's something that... It's an idea that has a bit of momentum. It shouldn't. I don't like it, but I'm not going to ignore that. So I imagine that happens. I mean, Mighty Mouse has some injuries he's going to have to deal with. He tore, I think it was his
I
LCL.
probably gave Cejudo the idea.
I mean, look, Cejudo's going to go up to bantamweight. If he fights a TJ, he's going to get crushed. He's just going to get massacred.
He'll get a nice payday, though.
Maybe. If he fights on the undercard of a bigger main event,
Relative to how he grew up, yeah.
I mean, sure, 90% of fighters all come from hard luck backgrounds. That's why you fight. I mean, why would a rich kid fight?
Ask BJ Penn.
Okay, BJ is just like the statistical outlier of all statistical outliers.
That's Ryan Bader.
Well, I mean, do we count Bader as actually fighting? I mean, he's in Bellator.
Yes, I count. Yes, I do.
I will disagree with how you qualify Bellator, but all right.
He used to fight in the UFC.
Sure. And when he's taking legitimately difficult
Shogun, he seemed like he had a pretty well-to-do background.
Eh.
Was a male model before he got into fighting.
So was Boss. Boss didn't have a affluent upbringing. Boss Rutan was a male model before, even during part of his fight career.
Damian Maia was a playboy, according to Anderson Silva.
That he achieved through fighting. More than anything else, and it's a sociological thing. The disadvantaged fight because they have to fight. The affluent don't fight because they don't have to fight. It's really that simple.
Except for BJ Penn.
BJ Penn has to fight because there is something wrong with his brain. I don't know where it happened. I don't know why it happened. But anyway, so DJ's going to be out. He's going to, again, probably have to have surgery on one of his knees. And his glorious return will be the third fight down on an ESPN Plus exclusive card against Sergio Pettis in a 3-round fight. After which he will win, wind up having to try to renegotiate his contract, be unable to come to terms, fight twice in Bellator, win spectacularly, retire permanently, and live happily ever after.
All right. Well, Moicano,
yes.
good on him for being so gracious to a UFC legend. But you don't have to when you're bowing.
Can I just say that Renato Moicano has utterly trivialized that show of respect?
Well, I mean,
he's done that to everybody.
Do it for like show the respect, but you don't have to do it for like 5 minutes,
Especially
Seriously.
when the other guy just does not want to be there looking at you. Like some guys are into it.
It's embarrassing, right? It's embarrassing.
I mean, okay, so for
He's
the
making
official
a mockery. He's making a mockery of the respect, is he not?
Again, it's just he has trivialized that show of respect by how often he does it and the circumstances under which he does it.
Like, okay, like you just.
I mean, him and Ortega having a brief, the jiu-jitsu thing where you're just kind of kneeling next to each other after a bout and you just kind of shake hands, show respect. That's one thing.
But you do, but like it's like in and out. You're done after.
But yeah, I mean, when Cub Swanson is standing there going, "Buddy, I just want to kick you in the face for choking me out in my hometown,"
you tell,
don't stay down there.
Yeah,
read the room, man. Read the room.
like it's there's such a thing as being too great. Now maybe he's sincere. I'm not saying he's not sincere, but when he does it that much, it's like he's making a mockery of it. You know?
It was just a poorly timed and poorly executed instance of that on his part in this case,
like,
which is sad.
Would once say, "Hey, thank you. I have so much. I'm sorry. I have so much respect for you."
Put him over on the mic once he's done with the emotions of losing. Maybe then, but in the immediate aftermath of that, no, man. Give the guy his space.
Yeah.
Anyway, for the record, Renato Moicano submits Cub Swanson.
I mean, great win and everything, and I mean, I was upset.
I should have called this
one.
Cub
Swanson.
This is the pick from this card that I'm annoyed by, because Moicano is, first of all, a beast on the ground that gets perpetually overlooked. That includes me. I actually brought that up at one point, that Moicano's a better grappler, but he doesn't like to force that. He likes it to be more reactive. And I really forgot how Moicano does throw kind of looping hooks, but only specifically on counters or once he's in combination. The vast majority of his punches are straight, and Cubs are loopy. This means Moicano is going to land first more often than not. And I really should have taken that into account more than I did.
Well, I picked Swanson here, but I feel like I'm not upset because I know that Cub is a slow starter. And even fights he's won, he'll take a lot of punishment in the early rounds.
Yeah, Moicano
and
just
he'll
hit this.
Eat punches.
He hit
and
this really nice stepping jab.
Like Moicano, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, because Moicano, for all of his flaws, such as they are, is not a slow starter. And that sequence on the ground, man, that back take from Moicano was that was slick, man.
But go back to Swanson's fight 4 years ago against Jeremy Stevens. Stevens he took the first 2 rounds of that fight before Swanson made his adjustments. Right? I felt like Stevens won almost the first half of that fight before Swanson took over.
I would have to double check. It's been a while since I've seen the fight, but I don't have any issue with that being what happened.
Stevens at least took the first round, at least. But
yeah.
Swanson is he tends to drop that first round.
He does frequently,
and he's hittable. He's always been hittable.
Yep. And Moicano exploited both of those. He said he wanted... I hate him for saying this, because he said he wanted an interim title fight with Brian Ortega.
Said it after, and I'm still angry about that.
I'm angry at anyone who calls for an interim title fight. Let me just be very clear.
Here's the fight. Chad Mendes. Not Ortega, Chad Mendes.
Yeah, him and Mendes, or him and Edgar. Either of those are the fights to make.
I think you want to keep Edgar a little handy right now.
I don't disagree, but again,
just because we might have to Dana White says Holloway's okay, but we might have to strip Holloway.
It might happen. And in fairness to Moicano, that fight with Ortega was around a piece going into the third, and Moicano's striking was starting to get there. He was having a fair amount of success.
Yeah, it was competitive.
It was a very competitive fight. I think I had it around a piece going into the third. And then Moicano just kind of gets... It's a combination of him getting clipped a little bit by Ortega and then kind of deciding, I'm going to get a takedown. I need this round. And if I can get on top, I'm a great grappler. I'm going to either finish him or at least ride it out safely, and just got caught in that guillotine going for it.
It's good we at least have like another young contender coming up in this division.
Much needed. Now hopefully the division can get. Now hopefully Max Holloway can get healthy. Max, get healthy.
But even if he does, he might featherweight. He might be done at featherweight. At least.
He might. And
you can't overlook that.
You can't. No, you really can't. And if he does move up to lightweight, I want him to fight Tony Ferguson because I am crazy.
I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Max is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, but I'm also very, worried about did these weight cuts just take their toll on him?
It's it's a non-trivial cut for him. He does it well generally, especially with enough time to prepare, but I don't know how long it's... I mean, he's young, but I don't know how much longer he can maintain.
And my other
that cut.
issue is, can Max safely get through another camp while cutting weight? That's my issue.
It's a question. That's
because Rafael dos Anjos, before he moved up, he wasn't able to do it. He was able to make weight, but he wasn't safely making weight, and he wasn't safely getting through training camp.
Yeah, it's a concern.
If you're passing out due to your weight cut, it's just not happening anymore.
You're probably that's not good.
It's another reason why I want training camps regulated.
Which again is also part of we need a federal
training camps and weight cutting, quite frankly. Because quite frankly, fighters can't be trusted to be responsible on their own.
I don't know. I oppose that philosophically more than anything else, but
Robert, so do I.
I'd be open to it
but so do
if
the
it
fighters.
Actually works.
So do the fighters.
I also, again, it's such a difficult thing to kind of how you would have to regulate where some of the guys are, how some of them move around. It's not impossible necessarily, but it's a tough thing to kind of grow from scratch. Anyway, moving on. Ugh. JJ Aldrich defeats Poliana
Rest
Viana.
of the card sucked. Let's just skip the rest.
All right, I'll mention to everyone what happened. No, there was one other good fight. Anyway, JJ Aldrich defeats Poliana Viana via unanimous decision. This fight sucked and should not have been on pay-per-view. Thiago Santos defeats Kevin Holland via unanimous decision 29-27 twice and won 30-26. Kevin Holland took this fight on short notice, and everyone loves him because he talks smack, even though Thiago Santos beat the crap out of him for the entirety of this fight. I have no idea which round you give to Kevin Holland, apart from maybe him having a bit of top position at the end of 2. On FX, Pedro Munoz defeated Brett Johns via unanimous decision 30-26, 29-28, and 29-27. Pedro Munoz is a moron. This fight should be subtitled How to Consistently and Frequently Let Your Opponent Off of the Hook. He had Brett Johns on one leg, badly damaged to the body, and in the second round had at least 2 opportunities to finish the fight, didn't. In the third round had at least 2 opportunities to finish the fight, didn't. Pedro Munoz is the slowest bantamweight in the world. He is the bantamweight for everyone that whines that bantamweights are too fast for them to follow. And apparently has unbelievably low fight IQ because he should have finished this fight. That's a bigger indictment on him than the fact that he won. Ricky Simone defeated Montel Jackson via unanimous decision.
I cut Pedro a little slack because his daughter has Mobius disease and she just went into surgery. So he had a lot going on.
Fair enough. I am potentially open to him altering this particular... If he shows this to be a one-off based on external circumstances, I will apologize for this rant and reevaluate him. But I need evidence to the contrary first. Again, Ricky Simone defeats Montel Jackson via unanimous decision. This fight sucked. Ricardo Ramos defeated Kyung-Ho Kang via split decision. This fight also sucked. Shimon Moraes defeated Matt Sales via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. This fight kind of sucked. Commentary for this fight was awful. I mean, just awful. They were just hanging from Matt Sale's nuts. Then on Fight Pass, Alex Perez defeated Jose Torres via knockout in the first round. Good grief, this fight. This fight lasted 3 minutes and 36 seconds. During that time, Alex Perez threw 137 punches / kicks and landed 107. I cannot express to you, if you have never tried to punch a bag for 3 minutes, how insane that is. Big win for Alex Perez here. A lot of credit to him for that. Zhang Weilei defeated Danielle Taylor via unanimous decision, 29-20 across the board. Decent enough debut for Weilei, who is on a significant winning streak and clearly has things to work on, but strawweight needs interesting bodies. I don't mean that in a sexist way. And she might be able to factor into that. And kicking everything off, Marlon Vera defeated Luigi Burin via TKO, mostly a body punch, in the second round. I don't know what to make of Vera. I really don't. There's clearly some potential there, but there are pieces missing from his game that I'm struggling to really see him get together. He's a long guy. He's got good kicks at range. He's got good combinations. He is very open for counters when he starts throwing them, but that's a much more sophisticated level of defense and alteration to his fighting than I think is reasonable for him at this point, all things considered. His grappling is good, but he's really he's too okay being on his back most of the time. It's, again, there's a lot of good pieces there, but he's got to put everything together. So, anyway, that was UFC 227. So, alright, Jeff, you mentioned the rest of it kind of sucked. Was there anything else now that I've kind of gone over it that...
I'm happy Thiago Santos won because I was singing his praises before the fight, and I think he's underrated, and I feel like he should have been able to finish this fight.
He should have.
But he did get this, his opponent changed at the last minute, so...
Well, he was supposed to fight a couple of weeks ago, wasn't he? Like, that was the whole thing, was he had a fight fall through last minute when he was in the midst of his weight cut for a previous event.
Right.
And then they just got moved to this, and Holland was the only guy that the UFC could find to take the fight.
Right. I think he's still an underrated, tough opponent for middleweight, and
yeah,
I mean, I think this is his 10th UFC win, so I mean, I think that counts for something. I'd like to see him fight a higher level opponent next. Maybe not like top 10, but yeah.
He just struggles against that. Really. He just struggles against that 7 to top guy. I think he's going to wind up as a high level gatekeeper. And again, I don't mean that as some huge negative.
Him and Antonio Carlos Jr. are kind of like my dark horses of this division.
Oh God, there was a fight. Shoeface was supposed to be on this card. He was supposed to fight Derek Brunson on this card, and it fell through. And yeah. I like Shoeface. I like Antonio Carlos Jr. He's come a long way recently. He's a tough guy to fight. But anyway, thanks to everyone who followed along. Those of you who did or who read the report, much appreciated. I don't necessarily deserve all the support that I get from you guys, but thank you, such as it is.
You do.
Yeah, I'm kind of whistling Dixie. I'm putting in, at least 6 hours of sitting in front of my computer screen every Saturday on a low-traffic portion of the website. It's...
All right.
Let me put it like this. I empathize with Demetrious Johnson.
That's why you like him so much.
That's part of why I like him so much. The king of a division that just struggles to draw, and he's doing his damnedest every time to be the best.
Good. Well, he is.
All right. The UFC announced some fights since we last met here.
Okay, so
where do we want to start with this?
Poirier versus Nate Diaz might happen.
It was announced and signed, which is no guarantee, considering Nate Diaz is Nate Diaz. I want to point this out as it pertains to Dustin Poirier if this fight happens. Assuming the Nate Diaz fight happens on the announced date, In the span of 6 months and a handful of days, Dustin Poirier will have fought Justin Gaethje, Eddie Alvarez, and Nate Diaz.
Give him the title, man.
Dustin Poirier is a lunatic of the
Just
best
give
variety.
him the title. He does not get nearly the credit or accolades he deserves. He should be fighting for the title.
Yes, I am of the opinion that he should. I said that after he beat Alvarez. He's earned his title shot.
He accepted this fight, so
I mean, nobody's putting a gun to his head, literally.
Exactly. He accepted this fight instead of trying to wait. I mean, look, even if you wait, there's no guarantee there will be a belt there at the end of it for you, you know?
Look, if he had waited and Tony Ferguson comes back and is healthy and is able to get that, then he's waiting for nothing and Tony fights for the belt.
I just hope, at least in accepting this fight, he'll get a good payday out of it. I got to be honest. On paper, I like Poirier in this fight, Robert.
Assuming he maintains the form that he's shown, yes.
I don't want to say Nate Diaz is overrated, but he's beatable, is he not?
No. Nate Diaz is in
this 11 fights.
Nate Diaz is in this weird position where everyone knows how to beat him, but not everyone can actually execute on the reality of having to beat him.
9 times in the octagon.
Yeah.
9.
Look, there's 2 ways to beat him. One is you have competent grappling defense and you out-wrestle him.
And leg kicks.
The other is leg kicks at distance. I mean, this is not a mystery.
But you can't fall into his traps. You can't let him get into your head and play his game.
That's the big thing. Again, Nate, beating him is not a mystery. Executing on it is quite difficult, apparently, because a lot of people fail miserably at it.
Right.
I mean, Michael Johnson, when he fought Nate, had a good first round and then fell apart. Donald Cerrone had a good round and then fell apart. It's easy to say, here's the holes, we exploit these holes, and it's another thing to do it when you're in there with someone who is actively resisting everything you're trying to do the entirety of the fight.
But I mean, he's really not that good off of his back.
He's good. He's better in transition than he is from static guard.
But I mean,
he's pretty good off of his guard.
Stevenson out-grappled him. Clay Guida, Rafael dos Anjos.
Hang on. He should have won the Guida fight. Let me be clear about that. That was another instance of
overscoring takedowns, whatever. Sure.
Yeah.
Stevenson, he for sure lost that.
He lost to Stevenson and he lost to RDA.
All right, what about Gray Maynard?
I mean, he beat Maynard twice. The fight in the middle.
The first fight with Maynard.
Second, sort of. If you want to count the tough house.
Okay. So the second fight with Maynard.
So the first fight in the UFC with Maynard, yeah, he lost. I mean, and then when they rematched, he slaughtered him.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, again, it's a thing of, okay, I know how to beat Nate Diaz. I mean, I know how to beat Nate Diaz. That doesn't mean if I fought Nate Diaz, I could beat him. Everyone.
Plus, it's at lightweight too. At lightweight, I really like Poirier.
Yeah, I favor Poirier, but you count out Diaz at your own peril.
Yeah, distance, leg kicks, and just don't fall to his trash talking.
Don't brawl with him.
Don't brawl with him. Keep your composure.
Yeah, and practice fighting backwards. That's one of the other things with Nate. Practice fighting moving backwards.
But who knows if this fight will even happen, going by Diaz's
because after they announced this fight, and they did the face-off, the UFC then announced Conor and Khabib, and Nate was subsequently pissed. They announced Conor and Khabib for the main event of 229.
Does Diaz have his head in the ground? I mean, it's like the UFC was not like keeping that. That was not like exactly a state secret, Robert. Come on.
No, it wasn't. And
the UFC made it clear.
Are you genuinely asking me to expect Nate Diaz to have a logical response to anything?
If that's his big tipping point, I can't defend. It's not defensible, in my opinion.
I don't disagree with you. But we've got Conor and Khabib, which will probably be one of the biggest UFC events ever in terms of box office.
Apparently, he says this. Apparently, he had a lawsuit with his management.
Who, Nate?
Nate apparently had a lawsuit where they were trying to claim representation over him for, I guess, one of his past fights. I don't know which. I forget which one. But that's what he told TMZ.
Well,
and to me, that's probably because and you want to know what? I would blame Diaz for that as well, because he and his brother probably don't know how to do taxes and they probably don't even read their contracts, or at least have someone they trust read the contracts to make sure everything's on the up and up.
Look, there are people around the Diaz brothers who are terrible to work with, and there are people around them who are good to work with. The fact that there is conflict there surprises me not at all. But again, so we have Conor and Khabib scheduled to main event 229. Assuming the fight goes through, that's a box office smash. I mean, Conor's the biggest star in the sport. Khabib is one of the biggest stars in the sport.
I'm not going to boycott anything over it, but I'm not happy about this fight.
That's fair. That fight, I am so torn about that fight. I mentioned it at the top of the show. Go ahead.
I hope Nurmagomedov ends McGregor's career for good.
To be fair, Khabib did say he wanted to change Conor's face. That was his actual line about that. I want to take this guy down, smash him, change his face.
McGregor is remarkably easy to take down. I hope.
It's not as easy as you think it is, but it's.
I'm not a huge Khabib fan, but you know what? And maybe I'm being poisoned by the hype. But I hope he gives Conor McGregor the worst 25 minutes of his entire life.
Oh, it won't go 25 minutes if Khabib wins.
Khabib likes to stretch the fights out.
And
He's not a finisher.
And Conor doesn't have the gas to defend the grappling for prolonged exchanges with Khabib if this fight goes 20 minutes, give or take.
Conor has been avoiding these fights his entire career.
Somebody joked that when Conor McGregor was a young man, he made a deal with the devil, that he would become the biggest star in MMA, that he would become champion many times over, but he would always have to lose his title in the first defense. That was the payoff. He could always get the championship, but he could never defend it.
He never defended anything.
Yeah, no, that's the joke. So Conor knew that and is now playing that off.
Oh, okay.
He knows he will never defend his title, so he always goes out of his way to have it stripped.
Okay, that's fine. That's a good joke. There you go. Sorry,
I got to laugh. I got to laugh out of that.
Sorry, I killed the joke though.
It's all right. Look, I need to qualify this. When I said I hate the circus, I don't watch MMA for the circus, right? Now, some people do, and I'm not about to yell at anyone for how they enjoy the sport. You enjoy the circus, enjoy the circus. I hate the circus around Brock Lesnar, but I hate it because it's profoundly stupid. And it is designed to obfuscate reality. Like, Brock's not beating DC. In no world. The only world in which he beats DC is where DC steps wrong and not only tears everything in his knee, breaks it, and the bone winds up sticking out of the skin.
It's not the circus I hate here. It's the bus thing for me.
And here's what kills me about the Conor circus. Brock needs the circus to sell. Because if we looked at that on its merits, it's not close, it's not funny, it's not deserving, it's nothing. It needs the circus. Conor, for all the circus and for all the faults and for as much as I don't like his personality or the way he presents himself, the man can fight. He doesn't... The circus, again, it actually seems to obscure the reality of his abilities because it distorts everything around it. Conor can fight, whatever else you think about it. The man knows how to fight. And in this instance, it goes one of two ways.
His run at featherweight was impressive and is deserving of praise because people I agree with you in his run at featherweight, but it's, to me, it was all downhill after that.
Oh, he's had no run since then. He's had intermittent fights. Like, his career at this point exists so far outside the normal.
Because look, he beat Chad Mendes, Chad Mendes was probably the scariest fight in his career, even scarier than Aldo.
In terms of stylistic matchups, yes.
Yeah. And he knocked out Mendes.
Knocks out Mendes, knocks out Aldo.
Right.
Knocks out Eddie Al. I mean, again, man can fight.
Look, he wanted to fight Mayweather. I guess good on him for following his...
Dude,
whatever.
Good on him for the paycheck.
I mean, I guess, but I mean, at the same time, like, you're the champion and you're doing all these things. Yeah, okay, but like, you're not...
Look, Conor exists so far outside the normal architecture by which MMA operates and is constructed.
Is that worthy of respect, though, Robert? Do I have to respect him for that?
In what context?
I mean, that he was able to make it himself an island unto himself. Does that deserve respect, that he was able to do that?
I'm of the opinion... given the context and given the realities of MMA, I'm of the opinion that it does. Again, you can dislike...
I'm struggling...
You can dislike how he went about it,
There was a time where I did, just because I felt like he was so smart. But now I feel like... I don't know, because, like...
I mean, look, the bus incident notwithstanding...
Because I kind of feel like he knew what he was doing before. Now I'm not so sure.
We'll see. I mean, that's a fair observation.
I wonder if maybe he had people... Did he just have smart people in his ear before who were telling him what to do?
I think when... And this is to Conor's credit, mind you. Conor always knew what was next. Every step of his career. And win or lose, mind you, he knew what was next. He could read that, and he knew what he wanted next, what he was going to get next. He always had that in mind. What's next? How do I get there? And how do I get there at maximum benefit to myself? And then he reached the mountaintop. Like, he got there in this hundreds of millions of dollars event, boxing Floyd Mayweather. And I almost feel like there was an Alexander the Great moment, where he wept because there were no worlds left to conquer. Like, what is next after that? And it's a tough thing. It's a really tough thing to ask, and it wouldn't terribly shock me if he struggled to figure out, okay, what's next from here? And he's only now arrived at where he is. I
mean, there were fights for him, and
sure, but again, when he's thinking about what's next, it's got to be what is not just what's next, what's bigger, what is of maximum benefit to me going forward. And
UFC is partially responsible for this because they would cater, because they fed this beast and they catered to its every whim, and to an extent they still are, but I don't know. It's hard. I feel like he's conflated the hype with reality now with this bus incident, and it's hard for me to accept him now.
That's fair. And if you still hold that against him and you have a hard time with that, that's fine. Like, I'm not,
because I mean, like, he's in the one profession where if you're really angry at a guy, if you're really that angry at a guy, you can get locked inside a cage with him for 25 minutes. Right.
Yeah, and let's not pretend that Khabib isn't taking that fight. Like, if you have one party that is, ducking, I can understand the frustration. Khabib's not going to duck Conor. He is happy to take that fight. He might lose it. I mean,
and that's a fight.
He could very
And, you know,
easily
that's
just
a
walk
fight we've
into
been
that
talking
hanging
about.
left.
That's a fight we've been talking about for years. Really?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think the breakdown of the fight remains the same. Either Conor gets Khabib to walk into that hanging left counter the same way he kind of did Aldo, and he puts him out, or Khabib closes distance and mauls him from the top. Like, there's not a whole lot of in-between space here.
But I guess my other thing is, I feel like all the big fights at lightweight for Conor, and maybe I'm wrong, in the matchups, I feel all the biggest fights for him are fights he loses.
They're all tough fights, if nothing else.
I mean, significantly tougher than all of his fights at featherweight, other than Mendes and Aldo.
Yes. I mean, again, he's fighting one of the worst matchups for him now in Khabib.
And Poirier. I don't think he gets enough credit for the Poirier win either. Because Poirier was, you know, people forget that Poirier was legit as a featherweight. Legit. Yeah. Very legit.
I mean, his win over Max Holloway is one of his most impressive wins, too. Like, he had some really good wins at featherweight.
Right. I mean, yeah, fair enough.
I mean, again, I want that rematch, man. That is the only Conor McGregor rematch I have any interest in, is him and Holloway at lightweight.
I'd have no problem with Khabib ruining Conor's night. I would have no problem with that.
I don't have a dog in that fight.
So Khabib, make weight, stay healthy. That's all I'm going to say.
Let's see. What else got announced? They filled out UFC 228. And they announced the card order. Your main event is Tyron Woodley and Darren Till for the welterweight championship. Did you see the pictures of Till next to Woodley?
Till's a big boy.
That is shocking to me. I knew he was bigger than Tyron. He looks a full weight class bigger than Tyron.
He probably is.
I mean, that was...
He probably is a full weight class bigger.
That was very surprising.
I mean, I hope Till will be able to make weight.
Yeah.
Safely.
Again, the joke about this, I mentioned this, was, like, Till wins a terrible fight. Just terrible fight. Till wins. They get an immediate rematch with him and Tyron. Till misses weight, vacates the belt, and Tyron and Colby fight for the vacant title at some point in 2020.
Me. I'm picking Woodley, though.
It's
in
tough.
In a very ugly fight.
It's tough, man. I can see how Till wins this. Tyron is very accommodating of going backwards. And Till likes to put you on the fence and tee off. That said, he's not a big combination guy until he feels you're hurt. And he is vulnerable to counters, the kind that Tyron throws rather well. So
Woodley does have power.
He does.
It's easy to forget, but he does have it.
Yeah. So I can see how either guy wins that fight.
Okay.
Your co-main event is previously announced. Nico Montano and Valentina Shevchenko for the women's flyweight fight.
Now, obviously, everyone's seeing this as just a foregone conclusion to give Valentina the belt. Is that wrong to do that?
Not really. I mean, I don't want to completely discount Nico for a couple of reasons. One, people forget. Like, everyone fell in love with Valentina after she massacred that poor girl in her flyweight debut. But Valentina can be a passive fighter depending on the matchups and how things are going.
She was a little passive against Amanda.
And for stretches against Holly.
In the rematch with Amanda.
And again, for stretches against Holly, like she's a gifted counter striker and is content to let you make the first move.
Gifted kickboxer.
Yes. And so I don't want to say that Nico can't win, but I have a really hard time seeing her win this fight. Pat mentioned it a few weeks ago. Nico gets by finding an area that she is better than you at, despite not being the best anywhere. She can find somewhere to attack you. I don't know what avenue she can force Valentina into that she's at an advantage.
Nothing against Nico. but I hope Valentina wins because I love her. Not like I'm in love with her, but I love how she fights, and I want to see a belt on her. You know, I kind of wanted to see her beat Amanda. Honestly,
I thought she did.
And maybe she did enough, but
and again, I scored it for her. I stand by that, but I'm not.
I think I barely scored it for Amanda, but it's just kind of one of the. To me, it's just kind of one of those. Yeah.
I'm not willing to get up in arms over it, but for the record, I did think she won, and I have thought she's won that fight every time I've watched it.
Valentina, I hope you make the nose rose.
The rest of that main card is Jessica Andrade versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Carla Esparza versus Tatiana Suarez. Good.
Not a bad-looking card, all
Yeah.
things.
And kicking everything off, you have Yair Rodriguez and Zabit Magomed-Sharipov.
Also have Aljamain Sterling versus Cody Stamann. Oh, Jimmy Rivera versus John Dodson. That's a very good
On
fight.
the co-main, on the prelims, yeah.
I mean, it just depends on how that main event turns out, really.
There's a handful of Yair and Zabit will at least be entertaining.
This lineup is a hell of a lot more well-rounded than 227, which was. I think so.
Do you remember the last Carla Esparza fight? Because I do. Can you ever remember an interesting Carla Esparza fight?
Zabit's a very exciting prospect.
Sure, and 227 had, in essentially that same spot, had Swanson and Moicano.
I'm looking forward to Zabit destroying Yair Rodriguez. I like Sterling versus Stamann and Rivera versus Dodson.
Yeah,
all good.
Sterling and Stamann is.
And Andrade versus Kowalkiewicz. The winner might be fighting. That winner is probably going to be fighting Doug Rose. That's a great fight for strawweight. Excellent fight.
It's a necessary fight. I mean, look, Karolina is.
She's having a good run.
No,
Andrade
is having a good run.
What's wrong with Karolina?
Oh, come on! She just got strangled by not Esparza. Damn it, Gedalia. What?
No,
fights
ago? She won her last two fights. She beat Jody Escobar and Felice.
Oh god. Yeah, but let me say this about Karolina. She's a version of Joanna that's not as good.
Right.
And Andrade is going to maul her.
All right, so if Andrade mauls her, she'll win and probably get a title shot. That's good, right?
Yeah.
Keep the division going.
And I, quite frankly, kind of like Andrade against Rose.
That's a tough fight. That's a tough fight for Thug Rose, really.
Andrade is a
tough fight. As
much
as I like her.
Andrade is a tough fight for everyone in that division apart from Joanna, based purely on styles.
Well, she was a tough fight for Joanna.
Yes. That was one of the most lopsided.
Oh, wait, I'm probably thinking of another fight. I'm probably thinking of the Gedalia rematch. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no. Yeah, Andrade and Joanna for the belt was horribly lopsided.
Gedalia's a tough fight too, though.
Gedalia's not easy.
MMA math is not absolute, Robert.
No,
right?
And again,
I just match up differently.
They do, but I think Andrade can do basically what Gedalia did, just with more violence.
I like this card, though. It's a good card.
We'll see.
On paper, it's a well-rounded card to me.
Hopefully it holds up. Again, I mean, the prelims. I think the main event of the prelims will either be Rivera and Dodson or Sterling and Stamann.
Okay.
Again, the other four are the pay-per-view card that's been announced.
Aren't you happy that Zabit is just going to destroy this kid Yair? I'm very happy about that.
I've soured on Zabit.
That makes me very happy.
I've soured a little bit on Zabit.
He could be a future champion. You shouldn't be sad.
No. He's got to sort some things out if he's going to get to that level. He circles to the same side every time.
Uh-huh.
He spins. He's not as bad with his spinning as Yair is, but he still throws stuff out there to throw stuff out there.
So did Bisping, and he became champion too.
No, Bisping threw out fundamentally sound stuff. Zabit reminds me of like John Jones for the first few fights, when he was just didn't know what he was doing almost, and was just throwing wild stuff because he could get away with it. That's what Zabit reminds me of. And that's a habit he has to break relatively quickly.
Well, it's good he's fighting Yair, because he's the king of that crap.
No, I expect him to win this fight. I expect Yair to throw something
Okay.
spinny and stupid, and Zabit takes him down and smashes him from the top like Frankie did.
Yeah, that's why I'm excited.
But if he engages in a prolonged stand-up affair, again, there's exploitable habits that he needs
And
to
I
get
hope
sorted
Carla
out.
bounces back here.
I am so not interested in that fight.
Otherwise, maybe Tatiana will have a good performance here. She'll move forward.
That's what they're hoping for. Tatiana's meant to be the up-and-comer. And she's the better wrestler and overall grappler, so...
Let's see. That Adesanya Derek Brunson fight got announced.
I don't know if that'll happen.
Why? Why is that?
I don't know. I just got a feeling. Something's going to happen to that fight.
I mean, I kind of hope not, but I think something's going to happen to McGregor versus Khabib. But who knows? Maybe we can get Ferguson in there or something. Maybe that fight can finally happen. Fingers crossed.
Tony's going to bust his knee again. Tony's a madman.
What do you got? What do you got against Tony?
I love Tony Ferguson. Don't even start with that.
Okay.
But he's also 34?
So?
There's things you can do, in your mid-20s that you can't do in your mid-30s. And I'm not saying he's not one of the best lightweights in the world. He is. But that bill comes due.
I don't think he's quite at that level yet. I don't think that's quite happened to him yet.
It might not have.
Age doesn't work the same for everyone. Age doesn't work the same for everyone in this
Age
sport.
doesn't hit everyone at the same point, but it absolutely hits everyone.
Yes, it does.
And
but I don't.
Then look, I'm not saying it will necessarily.
All right.
But
Well, we haven't seen Tony really lose to in quite a while.
Oh, he hasn't lost in a really long time because he's a really good fighter.
Right. So,
But
I feel like let's have that discussion when
it just also needs to be brought up that the man is he is exiting his physical prime.
No. Get out of here.
I'm not saying he can't win. Not saying
Get
he's a bad
outta
fighter.
here. No.
He is a great fighter. I love watching him fight. He is a madman. He is a violence machine. I love watching Tony Ferguson fight. None of that changes the fact that he's 34 and time only flows in one direction. Even when you get into extreme gravitational circumstances where it's distorted, it still only goes one way.
Okay, were there any other major fights announced?
Let me see.
Theodoro versus Antonio Carlos Jr. at Fight Night 137. Not really a huge fight, but that fight's happening.
I think they fleshed out a little of their Russia debut.
Yeah. Teixeira versus Manoa.
Okay.
There you go. You like that fight?
No. It's light heavyweight, man. The answer's no. The answer is just no.
Honestly, I don't hate that fight. I mean,
they announced Volkan Oezdemir versus Anthony Smith.
not terrible.
That's the main
But again,
event
it's
of
light heavyweight.
Again, light heavyweight, and it's the main event of Fight Night 138. Boy, that's a dog. They've only announced 2 fights for that card, and it's terrible.
You talk about a division that should be torpedoed.
Hey, I never said that flyweight should be torpedoed on merit. I said I think the UFC will do it. They should abolish light heavyweight.
If you had a gun to my head and asked me if there was one division I'd want to get rid of right now, gun to the head, it wouldn't be flyweight. It would not be flyweight.
No, look, you blow up light heavyweight, you bolster heavyweight and middleweight, depending on where guys want to go. Then you give it 18 months and reinstate the division at that point.
All right, temporarily. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, who's going to miss the division? Your champion put on 40 pounds to fight at heavyweight. Daniel Cormier is not making 205 ever again.
He unified the divisions. There you go.
You have a perfect excuse. Let's see. We already knew about Edgar and the Zombie. They announced Cerrone and Mike Perry for that card. Ooh.
Well, that's a good fight. It's an action fight.
That is a terrible, terrible fight for all parties concerned, but I will love watching it.
I feel bad. I feel bad for the brain cells of both fighters.
Somebody's gonna die.
I like Cerrone for that fight, actually.
I don't know, man. Perry's a big welterweight.
So is Cerrone.
No, Cerrone's an average welterweight. He's tall, but he's not thick. You know,
okay, fair enough.
If Cerrone can stay disciplined for a fight, he can take that. But if he starts slow, Mike Perry might just.
I think he's a better grappler than Perry, though.
One would assume, if
By
he
far.
chooses to use it.
When Cerrone uses all of his tools, look. You can't sleep on the fact that he dominated Eddie Alvarez in his UFC debut.
No,
you know?
No, I'm not. But again, if Cerrone starts slow against Mike Perry might just bulldoze him in the first 2 minutes.
I mean, Cerrone was unquestionably one of the top lightweights in the world at one point, right?
Yes, he was. He was absolutely.
Right. And I mean, he hasn't had as much success at welterweight, but he's been competitive. He's been fairly competitive.
Yeah, he's not been he's more towards the rank and file of welterweight, but he's certainly not a ham and egger.
Right. Even in his last fight wasn't like he got outpointed in a decision. Wasn't the worst loss. He's suffered worse losses than that.
He has.
That's a good fight. I like that fight, though, Robert.
Oh, God. So many years are going to be taking off of those guys' lives with that fight.
Yeah, so sorry to Cerrone and Perry, but thank you at the same time.
Now, don't feel sorry for them. They won't know the difference. Feel sorry for their significant others.
Sorry, yes, I'm sorry. Well,
feel sorry for their wives and their children.
I feel sorry for Cerrone's family. Perry, I think, broke up with his girlfriend. I don't know if he's got a new one.
Wonder if he kept the dogs.
All
All right. If that's all if there's no other major news, let's go ahead and do plugs and get out of here.
right. Check out my reviews. I will be reviewing The Meg later this week. Last week. You want to know something, Robert? This is my most anticipated movie of the summer.
Oh, it's going to be so terrible. I can't wait.
You know, you're mean. Okay.
No. Hey, look, let me be clear. That's the intention of this movie. They are, in all likelihood, not trying to...
Well, I feel like...
make a great movie. They're going to make something that is audience-friendly.
I hope it's entertaining and the shark looks cool. All right. Christopher Robin, kind of a mediocre live-action Winnie the Pooh movie, but your kids might enjoy it.
I'm going to be
Check
a
out
blubbering mess.
Star Wars Rebels Season 4, my Blu-ray review. Check that out. Check out my review of Mission Impossible Fallout, probably my favorite movie of the summer so far. My Comic-Con coverage is still trickling out. My latest one is my interview with Dragon Ball Super and Dragon Ball Sean Schimmel. He's voiced Goku for the better part of 2 decades, so check that out, and I still got some more coverage. My Iron Fist coverage will probably be next, so thank you guys, and have a good week.
All right. As for the schedule for us here, we're going to have next week off, actually, because there's a few weeks without a UFC event. So next week, again, there's no event. The week after, I believe, is when we will have our preview for Gaethje versus Vic. Nope. The 19th. So we're off the 12th. We're back the 19th to preview UFC Fight Night 135. Gaethje versus Vic, and that card is so not good. That is just not a good card. Oh, man. All right, but we'll preview it. We will soldier on. This Tuesday, Mark Radulich and I will be reviewing Christopher Robin, and I will be a mess the whole time because Winnie the Pooh was my childhood. So I imagine I will be destroyed emotionally. You can listen to Mark and I review Mission Impossible Fallout, which I did not care for, basically at all. You can find that on Damn You Hollywood if you want to hear my reasoning. I'm not going to go into it here. And then the week after that, we'll be reviewing The Meg, because I don't generally like bad movies. Not to say never, but don't generally, and I kind of think I'll enjoy this one, so that's our logic there, and then we'll have our summer wrap-up, I think, the week after. But I believe that's it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you for your continued support. Again, I'm not sure I deserve it, but I'm damn sure glad to have it. Back in 2 weeks. Until then, stay safe out there, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.